have a headache.
Yep. Same. So we'll
leave it in.
We'll bring the energy to this one.
Yeah.
We'll say it was about the Royal series.
Mm-hmm.
You can leave all this in. Hey, folks, welcome to the BN Cubs podcast. I am Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. We're here to talk Cubs a week out from the trade deadline. Thanks to Howard, Ankin, and crew. Injury Law Made Personal. Thank you, presenting sponsor. Okay, as we sort of said in the run up to activating the recording that I think our producer Addison is just going to leave in. We're both sort of down in the dumps because of the Royals, right? That's what's holding us down. It's all the Royals.
Turns out being a game back of the best record in baseball isn't enough. I need to.
All right. You know what? You just set me up for a question because that is what I want to talk about first, but I want to put it to you in a question. How differently would you feel about the prospects for the Cubs? Not so much how would you feel differently as a fan? Because I already know the answer to that, and we all would feel the same. If the Brewers had been leading the division all year, big lead, right? And the Cubs got super hot in June and July. And then by today, they were only a game out in the NL Central of the Brewers, who have the best record in baseball. If it had played out that way, would you feel differently? Because as fans, we'd be like, oh man, we'd be riding high. Like, we get that. We've done that dance before. But would you feel differently about looking ahead for the Cubs, even if it's the same, everything's the same. It's just that the order of how things played out.
The sequencing. Yeah. You actually just made me feel better because the Cubs throughout all this have still been, they haven't gone on like a crazy winning streak, but they've still been winning games like consistently all year. They have 60 wins, right? It's not, and the Brewers are 61. Yeah. 60 and 42. They're 18 games over 500. It's not like they had an insane stretch and then a cold stretch. They've just been like pretty good all year. And that's probably a better, more sustainable model of winning than just getting randomly hot or winning. Let's be honest. Listen, all the respect the Brewers deserve and blah, 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 blah. Like, they're winning games a lot of times they shouldn't be winning. It counts all the same. It counts all the same, but it's true. And so, like, which team is more likely to keep winning? Probably the team that's been consistently winning, not the team that spiked a variant high, and that was like some COVID language, spiked a variant. Their variants spiked. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it. And honestly, the other thing is this. I want to ask you this. Do you think it's at least this is just Brett and I therapizing each other.
You're right.
In reverse. Do you think that this is a reasonable thought I had?
Talk a little bit more about,
is it at all realistic that we look back and are happy that the Brewers took 6 in a row from the Dodgers? Like, isn't it a lot more likely that the Cubs are fighting for the first or second seed than it is, you know what I mean? So like
against the Dodgers,
against the Dodgers.
No, I get what you're saying.
And so it's possible that ends up playing out like that.
Maybe, but I would say the most likely thing right now is that the divisional race matters the most by the end. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's the most likely. And then close, but second is that top 2 record race. And of course, if that one becomes the one that matters, then yes, we'll look back and we'll be like, hey, thank you, Brewers. Because it's going to be the Dodgers will be one of those 2 teams. I just, they commensurate with the Brewers' ridiculous streak. People haven't been talking about this. The Dodgers went on a fluky opposite streak. They lost 8, 9 in a row. And there was a bunch of flukiness in it. And they obviously have some injury issues. So, I think it's still more likely that the division is I still think it's a little more likely the division is a tighter battle because I could still see one of those NL East teams taking off from here. They haven't really yet, and each of the Phillies and Mets both hit a really dark
that's
patch.
when it doesn't matter then though, because let's say the Dodgers and the Phillies or the Mets have the first and second seed as division leaders. Then the Cubs and Brewers, you can win the division or be the wild card. And there's the only difference is your home field advantage or which team you're playing, which, okay, that could matter, but it's
I think
not.
I don't want to yada yada over that. The Brewers are ridiculous at home. The Cubs are kind of ridiculous at home. So it does matter.
Okay. But like in a 1 game or 3 game sample,
but all 3 games are at the park. You know what I mean? Like it's all 3.
Yeah. I'm not okay. I don't want to not yada. But
I get your. I take you know what I'm saying.
Like
in a world where the top 2 seed doesn't matter, the division matters a little less. Like I get that.
You know, you're still only guaranteeing yourself those 3. But man, I want
to therapize a little bit more because the thing we can't.
I could see the headline of this the title of this article is Cubs Therapy with Brett
Cubs
Michael.
Therapy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's got to be a podcast name at some point. That someone in our space over the last 20 years did a short-lived podcast called Cubs Therapy. If not, they should. So, you know, we meaning we as fans, but also the Cubs can't do anything about the banked wins. We talk about this every season when people try to make the point that like, you know, but you really want to be winning in September. And it's like, well, strictly speaking, a win in April, even a fluky 1-run walk-off win in April is worth just as much as a 16-0 blowout in September, right? Can't do anything about that. The Brewers, through this crazy stretch, which, by the way, it's not just that they won 11 in a row. They've had a 6-week stretch now where they've lost 6 games. 6 weeks where they've lost 6 games. That's ridiculous. Can't do anything about that. Those wins are banked. But what I can note is this. So during that time, the Cubs went from a 6-game lead in the Central to now a 1-game trailing. And that carries with it a feeling of, oh my God, the Cubs have really dropped the ball in the division, right? The worst stretch you can find for the Cubs during this, the worst stretch is actually the current one they're on, and they're 500. You know, it's about a 3-week stretch where they're 500. That is the worst stretch you can find. In 99% of circumstances, if you go on a 500 stretch and you have a 6-game lead in your division, you know what your lead is at the end of that? 6 games. It isn't you're down by a game. Yeah. So the point is, what has happened in the division is basically entirely about the Brewers and almost nothing about the Cubs. And why does that make me feel better? Why is that therapy? Well, it's a bit of what Michael was saying earlier. As we look at these 2 teams and we try to project forward, it still feels like you can at least make the argument that the better team on paper and underlying metrics too still slightly support the Cubs being the better team. You'd say they're like a little more likely to win games going forward than the Brewers. And if this pitched battle between the 2 of them means that the team that wins the division ends up with like the best record in the National League, then maybe we will also look back. This one's a little bit of a reach, but maybe whatever the Cubs do over the next week before the trade deadline is a little more focused and win now oriented because of this pressure from the Brewers, because now it's not just that the need to make moves is like, oh, let's solidify our division lead. Let's try to help in the playoffs. Let's maybe take a run at the top 2. No, it's, man, if we don't do something now, it's like maybe the division slips away, and it goes from a first round bye to a first round 3 games on the road. I mean, that's a big swing.
Oh, huge. And you're reminding me too that like, the Cubs can finish with the 2nd best record in the National League to the Brewers, and they will be the wild card team. They do not get the 2nd seed. And that is brutal. And that is probably, I mean, we're going to have to wait for realignment for that to ever be solved. And maybe, and I'm not even saying I desperately
has it happened yet? I don't think it's happened yet that both of the top records were in the same division.
Sort of. In 2015, the Pirates had the 100 wins, right? Cardinals.
Well, but that was a different system.
But that was still to wild card. I know, but like,
yeah, they ended up having to play the Cubs instead of getting a full. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's
so that's
sort
why the
of
closest.
similar.
Yeah, it's similar. But that was 10 years ago, and
right.
So
that would be brutal. I mean, but who knows? But I think you're right.
Point being,
we're going to get into the trade stuff.
Yeah, hopefully it pushes them. Do you want to talk about next week though?
But 1 second, I want to make this point is that I do think your point has merit because Jed and Carter talk all the time about when adding more wins is more impactful. And so by that, I mean, they are not a front office that would go out and take a 82 win team in the offseason. And sorry, I'm laughing at our producer, Addison. They would not go into the offseason with an 82 win team and say, like, we're going to, well, an 83 win team was what the Cubs had last year, projected going forward, a team that they project to win 78 games, 81 games, and go make a bunch of additions because they think that the value of those additional wins, 5, 6, whatever you can add by trading for someone big or signing someone big, isn't as valuable as taking a team that projects for 85, 86, 87 wins and adding those pieces to that squad. And so that's
literally why they traded for Kyle Tucker. It's
exactly.
Like what you just described is exactly what they said. Yeah.
Right. And so that is why I think what you're saying about like now there is every additional win they are adding just got bumped up in importance. And therefore the calculus that they are definitely making is a little stronger. And so I think that you're right about that. And again, we'll get into we're going to talk all about the trade deadline in the second half of the show, but I do think that is a really good point.
So before, like you said, we'll talk about the trade deadline and the rumors and the names and stuff later. But before we get to that, how about we move through the schedule before we get to that? So the trade deadline is Wednesday, Thursday. Well, see, I think of it as 2 days because of the blogathon, which by the way, folks, if you haven't donated to Make-A-Wish, check that out. I'll have something up on that again soon just to nudge folks on that. But still need a couple thousand for Make-A-Wish in order to get me to the full 40-hour madness next week. But trade deadline is 1 week away. This is the 31st of July. But here's a rub. In the 3 days before that, the Cubs play the Brewers. And while it is true...
What a great series that's going to be. I'm so excited and nervous.
Pressure, yeah. While it's true that you wouldn't necessarily go whole ham and destroy your farm system in order to make a trade 3 games earlier than the deadline, right? That you could make if you just wait till the deadline when a seller might be like, okay, fine, we'll capitulate, we'll take your offer. Okay. It's a little different this time though, because for all the reasons we've been talking about for the first 15 minutes of this episode, those 3 games against the Brewers, kind of like 2 games apiece, they will end up having the effective value of 2 games because every win ensures a loss for the other team. And who wins that series may also end up impacting the tiebreaker, okay, which could definitely wind up mattering. There is no game 163 anymore, okay, so it's going to come down to the head-to-head record. And for those who are fearing a repeat, by the way, of 2018, there's your relief, right? Can't happen this time, at least not that way. And so it seems to me, and you've made this point before, Michael, that being able to make an impactful trade before that Brewers series, or even if only to get that new starting pitcher in for that second game in the series, I can't argue with anyone who says that takes on extra importance and that maybe it is justified to pay a little more in trade to get a guy or multiple guys in the door before the bulk of that series.
Yeah, especially because they have Shota and Boyd set up for that series, which good on the Cubs. That was clearly not an accident.
Yeah, they thought that through.
That was smart. The middle game is supposed to be started by Colin Ray, who, listen, he had a bad game. He's been pitching very well, and I loathe to, nag him too much because where would they be without him this season? I mean, he's been a significant contributor. As a bummer of a game the other day, but I still rather he not face the Brewers than, insert any name that they have been attached to. They're almost all better options than Colin Ray, as they should be. So I definitely do think that that's worth considering. Unfortunately, I don't think that's really much of a secret, and that's probably going to be held against Jed and Carter in negotiations. And I also think Jed and Carter are like always thinking long term in terms of their reputation as, well, I mean, at least Jed. I don't know Carter, I suppose, but Jed is like, I know for a fact he's like, this, I might not, if I don't blink now, then the next time they'll think I won't blink again. And it just seems like how he does everything. And it's described as patience, but I think it's just like, it's like playing blackjack by the book. You just always do it the exact same way, and then you're training your opposition to treat you the same way every time. So hopefully that doesn't come to pass. And frankly, I think he would probably look at us and say, no, he's not going to pay a little bit more for that game. But I agree with you that he probably should.
And it's not, even that expression, pay a little bit more, is probably a fuzzy thing when talking about trades for prospects, for example, because it's not like it's just cash, where it's like, pay a little,
right.
Okay, we'll pay $5 more. You still have to find the right alignment of prospects that match the need of your trade partner. And it's entirely possible that it's not that the Cubs would need to add a little bit more to get it done before Tuesday or whatever. It's that they would need to say, okay, fine, we will part with this prospect that we were going to maybe part with on Thursday or Friday or
right.
Thursday anyway. And then it would require a trade partner to say, can we get a better prospect if we wait till Thursday? No, probably not. So let's go ahead and do this. And it's not like, listen, we're a week out from the deadline. Usually some meaningful trades have happened by now.
I know. I wrote that in my stove. I go, I'm actually a little surprised there's usually, it's almost always like the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. There's like the one, it's just like the winter meetings where there's like the deal that happens on the Friday before the winter meeting starts or the Sunday before it really kicks off. And then the rest of the winter meetings happens. And that has not happened this year.
No.
And I know everyone gives us the runaround of there's more that's... Well, let me first tell you something. If I hear one more executive, every 100% of years, whatever executive you're talking to, if they're buyers, it's a real seller's market. If they're sellers, it's a real buyer's market this year. It is never, ever the other way around. And one, and two, there's always like a lot of bubble teams. There's always a lot of bubble teams there could be degrees of more certainty, but give me a break. This is the new playoff format. It has been like this for a few years. This is just how it is now. So I don't know. And I don't even really necessarily buy into the idea that let's push the trade deadline back to August 15th. Cause it'll be clearer. I don't think it will be. I think it'll be the same thing. It just later in the year. The issue was always moving the draft was one of them. And I think that just pushes everything back, and getting rid of the August waiver wire changes things too. So it's just like, I don't know, whatever. I'm sick of hearing that. I do want to see some activity, but I want to, let's put a pin in this because we're stepping on some of the trade talk. Yeah. And I do want to talk about Matt Shaw because he's had a good few games. And first, without setting you up for anything, in any direction, that is to say, what is your take on how he's been playing lately and the changes he's made or whatever?
Yeah, well, I want to note at the top that Brendan from Cubs Related has been tracking a lot of Matt Shaw's and some other folks too, but Brendan's really who I saw this through, is tracking all of the changes that Matt Shaw has been making to his swing throughout the year. And I want to note that for a few reasons, not the least of which is obviously coming out of the break, he isn't just having success, he's doing the thing that, I wrote about it about a month ago. We've talked about it in this pod that with Matt Shaw, the question coming up was always, so this is a guy who had tremendous success in college, tremendous success in the minor leagues as a professional, but has a very unorthodox swing. People fixated a lot on the huge leg kick. I think because it was so visual, like
Obvious.
yeah. But it was a lot more than that. He does kind of some funky stuff with his feet. He lands in a closed stance. He's triggering his swing in a way to really emphasize opposite field, and generally trading contact for power, despite being a smaller guy who does have a lot of power in his swing. And so the question was, is he going to just develop into kind of a Nico Horner type hitter with that emphasis on contact and opposite field, line drives, and just really good bat control? Or is he going to tap into some more of that power, which for him is almost certainly going to have to come pull side. And he's going to have to just start elevating more in the air if he wants to get some more of that power. Some guys can make that developmental switch at the big league level. Some guys can't. And you have to sort of, I remember this, I learned this with like Starlin Castro going way back. It was, he was that style of hitter, and it was like, okay, but physically he has the strength to hit for more power. Let's see if we can tap in a little bit more to that pull side air power. And it threw him. It made him a less effective overall hitter. And it took a little time for him to revert back to just sort of the best version of himself. Mm-hmm. And I think we can be a little too hard sometimes on hitters and coaches and organizations when they go through that process of figuring out what's going to work. Because with Matt Shaw, he rocketed through the minor leagues, right? And there was just no reason whatsoever for him to fundamentally change a ton about his swing when you're having that much success that quickly.
Yeah.
Right. But now, and then I'll pass.
I kind of have it. I want to take a little issue with that.
I gotta say one more, and then you can rant about how you hate Matt Shaw. Yep. But what I've been surprised to see this year with Shaw at the big league level is how many pretty significant tweaks have been made to his swing.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's all very noticeable. It is all impacting his approach and his swing in ways that, you just don't see this volume. Like we like to think about Miguel Amaya and Pete Crow-Armstong last year, who each made significant, but like singular changes, right? That then helped them succeed and sort of break out. And they carried forward to this year. And we hope for that for Matt Shaw. But with Shaw, it's been like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of tweak of this, a little bit of this. And now it's to the point even where he's got an almost open stance in some of his stride coming out of the break, which is one way to potentially activate that pull side air power, which we have seen on 3 home runs now. It's not the only way. And it's kind of a dramatic change for him. And it's in a more upright stance. It's a lot. And you typically don't see that at the big league level. Younger guys, more athletic. Yeah, sometimes. But again, it's standing out because it's a lot of changes in one season.
Yeah, no, for sure. And listen, I also, not to use your phrase, I don't want to yada yada over the fact that he sat right before the break most of those games and then was out during the All-Star break. They were clearly gearing up more changes, which is exactly the same time period Miguel Amaya sat last year, like July 1st through like the 6th or whatever it was, then the All-Star break, and he came back and it was like the big change, right? And PCA was around the same time. I want to say his hot streak started July 23rd, which I only remember because I did the cutoff in Fangraphs so many times to make his numbers look so good.
Do you know how else you'd remember? It was the Royals game that we watched for the watch party at the bar. Remember, he hit a home run or had a big game, and it was sort of like we would then keep going back to that as the cutoff to be like, wait, that was when he started being really good.
Yes, you're right. So there is a lot of changes, but here's the part that I have some issue with, and then I have some good numbers, is that Matt Shaw had no reason to change his swing because he rocketed up the system, had so much success, except for the fact that every single person, every 100% of people were like, that swing's not going to work. That approach is not going to work.
Or at least question whether it could.
Yeah. It's not like it was like, oh man, what a surprise. He's not hitting anymore. It was like, oh, this is what, and it's not just the closed stance. It was the way his front foot is inverted and like lifted off the ground. And it's just like, that doesn't look stable. It looks like and so I have a little bit of an issue to be like, listen, Cubs, maybe it is your job, hitting coaches, front office, manager, to say, listen, dude, it's not going to work. And we always talk about like the only way to get them to buy in is for them to struggle first. And it's like, okay, I guess maybe, but now we have a prospect making crazy midseason changes, and until recently, nothing has worked. Now these changes are happening and maybe it's working a little bit. And it's like, well, was it necessary to expose him and the Cubs team to so much just because you couldn't convince a prospect who you're going to hand the third base job to on a silver platter with nobody in front of him and nobody behind him? That's what it takes. Listen, maybe I'm being rhetorical because the answer is maybe there is some reason, but it seems a little like washing your hands of it. Like, what were we going to do? We had to let him struggle you did?
Well, so I'll soften that a little. I generally agree with that. I'll soften it a little bit in a couple ways. One, on the hitting side, the Cubs have an organizational philosophy now ever since Justin Stone came in and Rachel Folden, where they're less about transformations for players and more about augmenting the things they already do well and sort of like making that really good. And so it isn't as if the version of Matt Shaw that was coming up through the minors and having productive success didn't have within that also some things you really like, right? Like
sure.
Going the other way and hitting line drives is not a bad thing.
No, it's a good
that's
thing,
a
right?
bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just you want to be a little more opportunistic than that. You want to, unless you're a pretty strong dude with crazy bat speed, you're just not going to generate a ton of power that way in the big leagues. So there was probably a little bit of that where it was like, not that they couldn't convince him to make the changes. It was probably like, you know what, let's see if we can sort of smooth out the edges a little bit, let him feel comfortable. And then we know the whole thing when he first came up, and I think in hindsight, his approach clearly didn't work against big league pitching. And so he ended up becoming like a worse version of himself to try to survive. What the front office said. And so maybe in his case, it makes sense that there's been so much tinkering, especially because his glove has become so good at third base.
I know.
And the Cubs have had no other options, that it's kind of like, I doubt this was literally it, but it's almost like I can imagine them sitting him down in whenever that would have been late April or early May and been like, well, here's the thing, kid. Sorry, but we need you to keep playing. You're just going to have to figure this out right now.
Yeah.
And
wait, so I have a good concluding thought here on the Matt Shaw stuff. So first and foremost, I just want to say that since the All-Star break, he's barreled 3 balls, which is 16.7% barrel rate, which is insanely high. 33% hard hit rate, which is low, but better for him. 85.6 mile per hour average exit velocity. Before the All-Star break, his barrel rate was 4.3%. So it's way higher. That's a ridiculous, crazy difference. 26.8% hard hit rate, which is like the lowest in baseball. 83.3 mile per hour average exit velocity is like the lowest in baseball. So those are
Nick Madrigal numbers,
right?
For context.
And so all of that is what makes me more encouraged to also tell you the stats then, which is that he has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game hitting streak with 9 hits, 3 homers. I think he struck out 1 time, which is still crazy. That's, if you're going to do it like this, where you're starting to make harder contact. You're starting to barrel the ball up. That's what I want to see more than the results, because when he first came back up, I mean, I'm not trying to be a martyr here, but I got a little bit of shit for talking about how is like when he got called back up after his stint in the minors,
he was getting results, but
and it was like, you guys, his exit velocity is 82. It's like, it's lower than the lowest in baseball. This is not it working. Now I'd rather him go 0 for 20 and have the better numbers. So, but here's my question for you.
Except for the whole playoff implication thing.
Well,
but yes,
but that's right. And that's exactly. So here's my question for you. Given that his defense has been so good and that his base running is legitimately really good.
Yeah.
He's at a 79 weighted runs created plus. Yesterday it was an 80. Some players must have played better to push it back down, but I was thinking it was an 80 in my head. What number weighted runs created plus would he have to get to let's say the rest of the way, like you don't have to like think about it as beating.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do a 130 to get it up to. Would you be like, from here on out, if he was a 90 weighted runs created plus guy, is that good enough for the Cubs, for this Cubs team?
To like not go out and acquire someone? That kind of the point of the question?
Whether they do or not, is it good enough for them to win the, So yes, if they don't get someone.
Well, I'll say this, 100 is average. That's an easy yes, right? Because you're talking about a plus base runner who's a plus defender at third base in a lineup of generally above average bats, and a competitive team. Yes, that's easy.
You take that.
Easy.
Exactly.
And so why it's a fun question is like, well, what if he's just an 80 guy the rest of the way this year? We're not saying anything about his future.
No. Yeah. Just
it's
this
like,
year.
Yeah, you stomach that, especially because he does other things well. It's a version. I'm not dropping a Nick Madrigal comp on him just because I've mentioned him twice, but remember how that was part of how we talked about his value is like he was good at third base. He's not putting up above average numbers, but the fact that he can make so much contact does have ancillary value. Sometimes it's a sac fly. We saw that from Matt Shaw, walk-off sac fly because he put the ball in play. So, I mean, it does create some extra value that way. And so, I think that's so funny when you put it that way. It's like, because he has been that guy, right? That is his numbers right now.
That's
and
what
it's
I'm
like,
saying.
Oh, he was fine all along.
Right.
That's funny.
Well, I mean, what would it take you to not trade for Suarez then, let's say?
Yeah.
And we'll use this to transition. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
let's, it's going to have to be a lot higher just because of the potential impact that Suarez could have. It's like, I'm not going to not want him just because Shaw is adequately valuable, right? Like Shaw would have to be good, like affirmatively plus at the plate.
Well, because you're also talking about like Matt Shaw at 100 weighted runs created plus over the whole season with his base running and defense is a different story than what if Suarez hit 10 homers for the Cubs in 6 weeks or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, well, those actually could be way more important.
Right.
But anyway, is there a number? I mean, it's like 110. I mean, if Matt Shaw is 110, would you still want to give up stuff for?
Yeah. Would we even be having this conversation?
We probably wouldn't.
But you could still make the argument because then Shaw improves the bench dramatically.
That is the ancillary thing there.
But no, we probably aren't having this conversation.
All right, let's transition to the next segment of the podcast. This week's game, which is going to be less of a game and more of just some trade talk stuff, is brought to you by Feldco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves on delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. This week's game is not a game, like I said. I just want to talk about the upcoming trade deadline. So couple stage setting landmarks here. The deadline is a week away. The Cubs are roundly expected to be the most aggressive team, arguably. There's cases to be made for some other teams in a similar position, but the Cubs have some very clear needs and a very which helps a lot. Like, for example, if Matt Shaw hadn't been doing so poorly, that third base wouldn't be a clear need. It'd be like, oh yeah, maybe they could do a little better. It's like, nope, they need a starting pitcher.
And every team has that.
Yeah. And they need a reliever and they need third baseman, right? Those are the sort of the three big things. And the conversations often spiral about, are you getting one or two starters? How good of a reliever? And if you can't get Suarez, is there another third baseman? So before we get into any specific names, I just want to talk to you about the trade deadline in general, what you've been reading, hearing, thinking about, and we can go down whichever rabbit hole, whichever thread we kind of follow. Yeah. But is there any place you want to start? There's a lot of names been thrown out there. Happy to list them off for you. But I think you know who's out there.
Yeah, I'll keep the lens wide for a moment and just note for listeners that this is a case where, and I think this is probably true for Michael too, that the things that we're hearing offline, so to speak, match pretty well with what's being reported. I think this is a year where there isn't a lot of hiding the ball in terms of how active the Cubs hope to be able to be, how much effort is being put in to try to land the right pieces. Doesn't ever mean that deals will get done or that they'll land your preferred guy, right? But it is a year where I don't think it's a lot of smoke that's out there. I think they are going to try very hard to land at least one starting pitcher who could start a playoff game, sort of that tier. I think they're going to be creative in the bullpen. Wouldn't shock me if they added 2 relievers, and people will be like, what? I just think that's how they operate there. And they'll be serious on at least Eugenio Suarez, at least. I don't know that the other third base options we could maybe talk about.
Willie Castro, Michael Garcia.
Yeah. I don't think Garcia is going to be
Ryan
available.
McMahon. Yeah.
I don't love the McMahon fit. I don't like his contract after this year. Castro, solid. I think he's going to be really sought after because of his versatility. He brings in a lot of markets. And then you've got Moncada from the Angels, but he's been so bad at third base. He's hitting again and he's healthy, but he's been so bad at third base. I don't know that you can justify that. And then there's just surprise guys sometimes that end up being available Urias with the Orioles, who's like a solid bench guy who it brings back the Matt Shaw question, but he'd be, an upgrade over what they've been getting at third base and on the bench. And so sometimes we get surprised just because a guy hasn't been heavy in the rumors. But anyway, that's kind of the third base conversation for me is just a short one. It's like Suarez is an obvious, clear, perfect fit. That's true for the Cubs. It's true for several other teams.
Yeah.
So the price tag is probably going to be at the highest end of what we've seen in recent years for rentals.
Yeah. So a couple things too. I think people sleep on this. So Suarez, I think people sleep on this for Suarez for a couple reasons. I know everyone knows that he's a big, target of the Cubs and theoretically, but I see a lot of do we really need offense? Our offense is clicking and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, one, yes, because you always can add more, and a guy who hits homers can be disproportionately valuable in October. That is a huge, serious, legit. It's like homers in October are like relief pitchers in October. It's like disproportionately valuable. But also the fact that he's right-handed, I think we sleep on a lot because the Cubs' best hitters are lefties. Bush, PCA, Tucker. You have Suzuki. You need another right-handed bat would help a lot. But then a third reason that I think is really important is that if the Cubs are not going to be a dominant pitching team, which they probably won't be absent some very surprising trade, then they need to have the best offense in baseball. And they might be there already or close to it, close. If you add Suarez and he continues to play as he has played, then they are. Then there's that is a 1 through 9 that is insane. And like you have said previously, by adding someone like him and pushing Matt Shaw to the bench, you immediately get your defensive upgrade. You get a better base runner or a good base runner. They have some good base runners on the bench, to be honest, but that's all they are good for, really. And John Birdie's been pretty good relief pitcher lately. And so that's why I think he's a uniquely good fit. And so I'm kind of reaching the point where it's like almost Suarez or nobody. But I don't know if there's some surprise guy out there, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Urias or Castro because they can play elsewhere, because it's sort of like they affect that position, but also the bench. Like those would be fine additions. It's not Suarez or bust for me in terms of like doing anything on the positional side. But in terms of a move that's like, that gets you excited about them pushing, it's Suarez or bust in terms of positional moves. Because in the outfield, maybe they add a bench guy, but it's not going to, move the needle. Otherwise, it's rotation and bullpen are where there are options that I could get. You could sell me on a lot of the starting and relieving options.
I have a couple more that I want to get into. So Seth Lugo is a guy that's been brought up a lot, and I think I understand why some people are excited about the prospect of trading for Lugo. Some of our friends, some of our smart baseball friends and people in the industry, and I know he didn't perform well against the Cubs recently, but I look at his numbers this year and I see a lot of overperformance. He's a guy who's consistently outpaced his xERA and his FIP. So I know that that's a thing, but it's much more dramatic than usual. I wrote about it in the pregame when I was writing up the pitching section before his start, and I almost got scared off of him because of that. What do you think about Seth Lugo? Where are you? Where is he on your degree of attractiveness?
It's fine. Historically, the Cubs do well with pitchers like that are sort of off the barrel types. And it could be that because he's like this crazy spin guy, that maybe there's something about the way he works that it just makes it really hard for guys to square up, and he'll always outperform the peripherals in a really significant way, maybe less than he has so far this year, but still significant enough that he's a front three guy in this rotation. You could convince me of that. I don't love that he's got the 15 million player option for next year, because as we know, if something happens to him in September, his elbow pops, the Cubs just lost 15 million of their budget for next year for nothing. And I hate that matters, but it does.
Yeah.
So to me, the price tag on Lugo would need to be pretty low in trade. And I'm not sure it will be. I think he ends up staying, by the way, with the Royals, is my guess. The guy in the Royals that I'd like to see the Cubs pursue is Chris Bubich. And I don't know if he's going to be available or not.
Just think of the obvious shirts with a last name like that.
I know. There's two ways you can, I'm not going to say, but so yeah, as far, and frankly, as far as the entire market goes, he'd be right there in the top 3 of my preferred options for the Cubs. Realistic.
So I agree with that. I'm gonna tee up a different version of this because I wrote this yesterday in the lukewarm stove, and I'm coming around. I think it's possible, even though every individual trade we talk about is unlikely on its own individual, merit, because there's 30 teams, some players, whatever. We're talking this all on relative basis. Knowing that the Cubs want to do maybe a one-stop shop sort of deal where you get a starter and a reliever, or a starter and a third baseman, whatever. I'm coming around pretty significantly to the idea that Mitch Keller and David Bednar is the best bang for their buck, for their prospect buck, that they will be able to get. There are better starters and with higher upside, and there are better closers, maybe not with higher upside, but with more consistency than Bednar had just because of last year. But I think he's very good. I think you can get, because of Keller's contract and because of Bednar's 2024, you will be able to acquire, even with the in-division premium, no better combination of arms for the prospects you give up than those two, based on what's out there. That's what I think, but I want to tee it up to you to see if you had any insight.
I think the comparable combo move that we would want to talk about would be one of the Diamondbacks pitchers and Suarez. Mm-hmm. Not a starter and reliever, so it's not a 1-to-1. But in terms
it's the same idea though. That's exactly right.
I think the price tags could be similar, even though the Diamondbacks ones would be both rentals, and in the Pirates case, they're not. But
Bednar's under control too. That's.
Now, relievers at the higher end of the pay scale for control, teams don't necessarily pay a whole lot more for like that, the $10 million a year of a reliever in his 30s. But with Keller, especially, he's got 3 more years after this at not market rate, probably under what he would get if he was a free agent, but it's not cheap. It's not cheap. No. It's an acquisition where, I've said this before, the Cubs would have to believe that they wanted him anyway as a multi-year guy on a deal like that, because they like this or that about him. And they are effectively making one of their offseason moves now.
But two with Bednar. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like,
sure. And
if they like Keller and Bednar.
Yeah. And I just think it's a fair I think reasonable minds could disagree about which of those two packages you should pay more for. Mm-hmm. And I think they'd be similar. I'd probably argue that the Diamondbacks one should net more in trade, even though they're both rentals. I think Suarez is that sort of unique on this market right now, which is unfortunate for the Cubs. It's a
real seller's market this year, I'll tell you.
And so, I think the one-stop thing is nice because it brings a different tier of prospect into the conversation. But, you know, like I'll just say it makes talking about Owen Casey as a potential trade piece a little easier, right? Because you're not trading him just for like Zach Gallen, or at least
yeah.
and
No.
So, but if it's Zach Gallen and Suarez, then it's like, oh, well, we can have that conversation. And so I'd like that. I think it's more likely if the Cubs do a multi-player stop is going to be for someone we've talked about, and then a reliever that we didn't even know was, you know, it's a pre-arb guy or whatever.
That was going to be the related point I made that you sort of triggered in my head when you were talking, is that it's, let's say there's a starter in each package and it's Keller or Gallen or whatever. It's much more difficult to get a replacement for Suarez than it is to get a replacement for Bednar, even though Bednar is like maybe uniquely good and among them, but there's way more relievers that will be available and the Cubs could then go get, whereas there's not more third base options. Okay. Two more quick ones for you. But actually I'll package them right together. And this could be our last sort of topic of discussion. Over the last week, there have been new rumors connecting the Cubs to much more interesting arms. And that's Dylan Cease, who's had his troubles this year, but not really. I think he's probably still really awesome. Yeah. I think people are way sleeping on that. And Mackenzie Gore. And I want to put you on the record, to whatever extent you think or care to comment on how likely it is for something of that degree, not necessarily either of those two guys, but something like that to happen, and whether or not the Cubs should be thinking that big. If you think that's the right thing to do, like if this is the sort of deal that's going to take Jackson Wiggins or Jefferson Rojas or Owen Casey, like something like that. Is that how big the Cubs should be thinking? And how do you feel about those guys?
Well, I think that the Cubs have an interest in going that big. I really do. And I think that that's if there's a reason why we don't see them make a move in the rotation before that Brewers series, this is why, is because someone has put them on the hook, baited them well enough to think there's a chance that they could get one of the big ones if they wait to the deadline. I think that's more likely than a trade happening sooner. Now the question is, do I think that's the right approach? Like if the Cubs could get Sandy Alcantara now, or they could wait to Thursday and maybe get Eber Cabrera just to make it one team and keep it clear. Sure. Right. I don't know. I've never been a good hot take machine because I'm someone who's like, well, I can see the merits on either one. Okay. And I think for that particular case, it would come down to, okay, well, how do we project each of them going forward? I understand that Cabrera is the more attractive trade target in salary, upside. He's younger. There's less of an injury question, even though he had the elbow thing that shut him down. Mm-hmm. Whereas Alcantara hasn't stabilized yet since he's come back from Tommy John. But I'm of the mind that Alcantara has shown something in the past that Cabrera hasn't yet.
Yeah,
and
true.
Just feels like Sandy, he's got the velo back. It just feels like he might be a little tweak away. I've noticed his arm angle, not to like go all about the sliders and say that it's one thing because it can be a physical issue, but his arm angle is like significantly down from his pre-injury. And it's like, is that maybe just indicative of a little mechanical tweak? And then suddenly a lot of things come back. And also getting on a competitive team, getting out of a situation where it's like he knows the Marlins want him to pitch well so they can trade him.
Yeah.
That can't make it easy for you to be at your best. And so anyway, to get to what your question was, is ultimately, I do think this Cubs team is good enough and is singular enough in terms of how competitive they can be this season that they should be thinking the biggest possible move in terms of impacting the 2025 team. That should be the primary focus. Doesn't mean that they'll make it happen. Doesn't mean that there isn't a version of a trade that's sort of bigger picture, longer term, that's still good. But just to leave it with where you put it, I don't think Gore is going to be, I
realistically available.
Right. With an interim executive leading the team, I think it's pretty hard to pull that off. I'd love it. But with Dylan Cease, yeah, if the Padres are really trying to do a buy sell kind of thing and they make him specifically available, he's probably the top guy that's been rumored that I would want making a playoff start for this year's Cubs team. So,
probably the first, maybe
probably
even.
the first.
No, I hear you. And we don't have to drag this out, but you did just give me an idea. And now I want, maybe more than anything, Sandy Alcantara as a secondary starter that they acquire, because then it's like all gravy. And then you can work with him in the offseason, get him ready for next year if it doesn't work out. But if you get a starter for sure and then Alcantara, then you're buying yourself like kind of both ends of that. But I don't know if that's really doable, but that would be pretty fun.
I wouldn't surprise me if the Cubs have kicked that idea around. That's what I'll say. Of adding two starters in that tier. I don't know that it'll happen, but okay. Well, yeah, let's leave it there. So next week, we normally record on Thursdays. We've got the blogathon and the trade deadline on Thursday. I might try to nudge our producer Addison and Michael to record on Wednesday earlier in the blogathon.
Yeah, that's probably the thing to do. Or especially Friday after the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's the other possibility. Although,
why don't you listeners tell us too?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a zombie on Friday, so
yeah. Well, that might be fun.
In any case, you'll hear from us next week, one way or the other. This is the BN Cubs podcast. It's brought to you by Ankin Law, 312-6-million. Injury Law Made Personal. Thank you to Howard and crew for sponsoring the show. Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you, Michael, for being a bro podcaster with me. And, folks, read our stuff this week, and we'll hopefully have some fun stuff to get into from the Cubs lead up to the trade deadline. I'm Brett. That's Michael, and goodbye.